talk about
They
the
look
fort
like
for a
three
couple
grandmas.
minutes. The fort has nothing to do, the building of the fort has nothing to do with the Civil War. We're here after the War of 1812. Right after the War of 1812, the U.S. Army embarked on a big fort building program of 42 new forts, bigger and better than anything built before. Fort Sumter was added to the entrance to Charleston Harbor here to work with our older fort. Across the way, Fort Moultrie, which was built in 1809. Having two forts at the harbor entrance was an ideal situation to catch enemy ships in a crossfire. Ships that, of course, were trying to get into the harbor and attack our fair city, which is about 3 miles out. So they started building it in 1829, and remember, it was a government project, right? We're going to have it done in 12 years. 30 years later, it's still not finished, which means it's almost obsolete before it's even finished. Now, this was quite a grand structure in its day. These outer walls went up 50 feet tall, and that's about the red band on the flagpole. That's about 50 feet off the water. So inside, you would have seen guns on 3 levels, because it's a basic pentagon. That's the base. The points here. On 4 sides, you would have had guns on 3 levels. 2 sets of arch gun rooms, and then guns sitting up on top. So she was built for 135 cannons. One of the neat things that's missing is 3 3-story buildings. There's nothing left from them, but a little rubble across the back wall and a brick floor over here where one of the soldier barrels is. 650 men, 135 guns is what it was built for. None of that ever saw the light of the day, because she wasn't fully fitted out and ready to go by the time the Civil War started. And we didn't have near as much of soldier strength as that. The U.S. Army in peacetime was small, folks. So, the Army went out and built this magnificent chain of forts up and down our coastline. Half of them weren't even manned in peacetime. Okay? They would put like maybe 75 to 80 soldiers like every 3rd fort down the line. Charleston, we had 85 men in the U.S. Army. 13 of them were musicians, the fort's band. And it's not this fort, it's the old fort, Fort Moultrie. That's where the U.S. Army is. And at the end of 1860, they were under the command of a major named Robert Anderson. And, well, what's happening at the end of 1860? Election time, November 1860. I think we know who won the presidential election. Yeah. Abraham Lincoln. And that really started the ball rolling for Southern states to secede from the Union, because the chasm between the North and the South has been growing and growing and getting wider and wider as the decades pass leading up to 1860. Is to a point where when Lincoln and the Republicans won the election, planners across the South were fearful that the country's going to be put on a fast track to the abolition of slavery. It's going to wreck our economy. It's going to do away with the life that we've been used to for many years. It's our right to hold slaves. So that's what really started the secession movement. On getting underway, South Carolina first state, December 20th, 1860. So here's another little tidbit. It's not, super exciting, but it plays a big role in what's going to be going on in the South in early 1861. When these southern states seceded from the Union, they firmly believe it was a full and complete severance of ties with the United States. Therefore, any federal properties that the United States built within their bounds, hey, it belongs to us now. We rightfully inherit it because we're no longer part of the United States. Now, the government in Washington vehemently disagrees. No. Built for the United States remains property of the United States. But folks, they can't enforce it because of the lack of U.S. troops. Imagine one of Fort's sister forts that's not manned in peacetime. You go to visit the fort, you walk in, there's 4 old men living in the fort. What the heck's this? They're caretakers. That's all they are. There's no troops. So the local militia, and our state has just seceded from the Union, right? Our local militia is full of young bucks ready for action. Hey, The fort down the road's only got 4 old men living in it. We're going to march down there and take it in the name of our sovereign state. Happens time and time again, not only with forts, navy yards, courthouses, post offices, you name it. Anything Uncle Sam built is going to be taken over by local militias. So there was a long lame duck period before Abraham Lincoln was elected. He doesn't come into office until March 4th. When he comes into office, 7 southern states have already seceded from the Union and formed the Confederate States of America. And old Abe kind of wonders, gee, how many forts are still under our flag on the southern coastline? 4, Mr. President. All the others are captured by local militias. Now, the biggest one of Fort Sumter's sister forts is Fort Monroe, Virginia. But at that time, Fort Virginia is not going to secede from the Union until after the war begins. So we can't count Fort Monroe in the 4. So you have Fort Sumter here, and the other 3 are down in the wilds of Florida. Nothing's going on down in Florida much in those days. 2 in the Florida Keys, Fort Taylor, Key West, Fort Jefferson on Dry Tortugas, and up the coastline, Fort Pickens off of Pensacola. And Abe figures that we had better reinforce, resupply, get more soldiers to these forts before they slip through our fingers. So we need to get troops and supplies to these forts pretty darn quick. Now, number 1, ordering in ships for the U.S. Navy that are scattered all over the place is not really feasible, because this has to be done expeditiously. So it's basically you're going to contract this out, right? Go up to New York City. There's plenty of ships for hire. So transport ship. Oh, look over there. There's a passenger steamer that could take about 200 soldiers. So all this is forming up in New York Harbor, being watched intently by Southern sympathizers, reporting every little tidbit back home. I think Charleston knows more about this expedition than folks in New York involved with it. And the purpose of this is sail south, reinforce and resupply the ports all in a row. You're going to make 4 stops, right? Guess where stop number 1 is? Right here. So you kind of wonder, why did the Civil War begin in Charleston Harbor? That's the reason. We're like UPS drivers, we're the first stop, with these ships. So now the Confederate government, of course, they get wind of this, and they're hopping mad. What a dirty trick by Abraham Lincoln to further violate the sovereignty of the Confederacy. It's bad enough that we got Yankees in 4 forts on our coastline. So it's up to Charleston to prevent this from happening. Try to trip them up somehow. How are they going to do that? Cannons. From the early days of 1861, local militia's been scrounging up every cannon they can get a hold of, shipping it to Charleston Harbor and mounting it on the islands around this fort. The guns of the day could only shoot a round cannonball about 1.25 miles. So there are plenty of cannons mounted on Sullivan's Island across the channel this way, Morris Island this way, and Fort Johnson, which we passed right over here. Nothing came from downtown 3 miles away. Don't go down to the battery and say, oh, there's a cannon pointed at Fort Sumter. It's nothing but a park with cannons in it, folks. That's all it is. It has nothing to do with Fort Sumter. So the ships that had left New York first week in April are due in here April 12th. Local Confederate officials visiting Fort Sumter try to coax Major Anderson here to giving it up before April 12th. That would be convenient to get a surrender, get the Union troops out of here, have a Confederate flag up, and then when the ships approached, oh, there's nothing to reinforce. Maybe we'll go on to the next stop. But Anderson would stand his ground. Even at 1 o'clock in the morning on April 12th, a Confederate delegation visited the fort, and again, Anderson politely refused. They point blank told him at that time, we regret your decision. We're going to fire on you before the sun comes up. Have a nice day. So sure enough, the first shot, when he heard the first move at 4:30, it was no surprise. The fort returned fire at 7 a.m. Then you see the ships offshore shortly after that. They're sailing up to a firefight. What is this? Remember, not warships, chartered ships. Can't get involved. No cannons. They lay offshore, ringside seats for the rest of the battle. 34 hours start to finish. But the afternoon of the second day, Fort Sumter will give it up because they've expended everything to fight the war with: gunpowder, cannonballs, and they run out of food. They got about 95 mouths out here to feed. And Charleston had cut them off from groceries and supplies when the ships left New York. Previous to that, in early 1861, despite the tension in the harbor here, Fort Sumter is still buying groceries from the merchants of the city. But when the ships left New York, no more, cut them off. So what was in the pantry was all they're going to have. And they had pretty much eaten it all up by the time April 12th rolls around. So Major Anderson knew it was a fight that he's never going to prevail. Give it up, live to fight another day, right? The Confederates take over. They negotiate terms. It's an amicable turnover. Anderson and his men are going to carry as much gear out of here as they can. How are they going to get out of here? Hey, we've got ships laying offshore here, right? Get word to them. We need a couple of y'all to take Major Anderson and his men back to New York. The other ships will go on and successfully reach the forts down in Florida. The day after Major Anderson and his men leave here, Abraham Lincoln calls on all the governors of the northern states. Gentlemen, I need you to activate your militias because the United States has been attacked. I say, well, where's the United States been attacked, folks? Where do you think? Right here. Okay, does it matter that we're in South Carolina? No. Does it matter we're in Charleston Harbor? No. Federal property. Someone attacked federal property and fired on U.S. soldiers. Anybody that does that's going to get a response. So that's what we think of as a declaration of the war. And at that point, I don't think either side realized the 4 bloody years that's ahead of them. The destruction of the fort, let me whiz through this real quick and let you go. The destruction of the fort came later when the U.S. Army and Navy, seeking to gain a foothold somewhere on the southern coastline, but avoiding large Confederate concentrations such as Charleston and Savannah, captured the Beaufort Hilton Head area south of us, where there's a nice little harbor called Port Royal Sound, but it wasn't a priority for Confederate Army attention. The Union monopolized on that. Took them a day to capture Beaufort Hilton Head. They're there for the rest of the war. After a failed overland march to capture Charleston in 1862, a year later, they're coming back after Charleston by capturing the Sea Islands, heading for Morris Island out here behind us. The new plan is to use new technology in the form of rifle guns that fire bullet-shaped projectiles, hit your enemy 5 miles away. Don't throw a bunch of manpower at Charleston, capture Morris Island, set up the guns, and then basically pound the heck out of the area until the Confederates will give it up. So let the artillery do the talking. Don't throw manpower at Charleston. It was very bloody fighting out there in the summer of 1863. The most famous battle that took place out there involved a unit called the 54th Massachusetts. And these folks were some of the first Black U.S. soldiers to go into active combat. And the story of the 54th Massachusetts was made into a movie called Glory about, it's already over 20 years ago. Denzel Washington, Matthew Broderick, pretty good movie. But that final battle where they're attacking a large Confederate earthwork on Morris Island took place about 1.25 miles from where we're at right now as the crow flies going that way. The siege of Charleston went on for 1.5 years, folks. we're the most bombed area in all of North America to this day. Because the Confederates are just being stubborn. We're not going to give it up. Bomb the heck out of us. We're never going to give it up. Okay. Well, don't never say never. Okay, because the inevitable is going to come one day. At the end of 1864, Charleston looks like a shattered ghost town. Most of the civilians have fled, and the city is really tore up from the siege. And of course, Fort Sumter, 3/4 of it destroyed. But they're hitting this place 500 times a day with exploding bullet-shaped projectiles. Okay, this is an 1820s design meant to be hit by round cannonballs. Okay, things just aren't going to match. They're going to tear the heck out of this place. So that's why it looks as it is. But it's not the prolonged siege. I mean, we're going into 1865. This is still going on. But it's going to be something completely different. That'll flush the last of the Confederates out of Charleston. In the beginning of 1865, a massive U.S. Army of 70,000 men or more is coming up out of Georgia, passing around the west side of the city, led by a Union general that is still well not liked in some parts of the South. Of course, William Tecumseh Sherman, cutting Charleston off from the rest of the world. They've almost encircled the city. The handful of Confederates left here, no, they can't do anything but flee. You can't fight it. If you stay here, you're going to become a prisoner. If you want to head up the coastline of North Carolina, that's still open. You better get going while the getting's good. Charleston was abandoned by the Confederate Army February 17, 1865. Union folks just walked the road in at their leisure over the next couple days. U.S. flag goes up, and the Civil War's over in Charleston in the middle of February 1865. Remember that famous Lee Grant surrender? Right, that's April 9th. So it's over here, February. And what most people agree is the end of the Civil War is April. Final note, I promise. Like I said earlier, they never rebuilt the old fort. The Army just cleared out the rubble, propped off the wall, left the bottom here just because it's here. But with coming a new technology again, heading into the 20th century, we're already in the age of the modern battleship. The Spanish-American War proved that. We have to beef up our coastal defenses. Still worried about folks attacking us. That's where this lovely thing comes in. This is a 2-gun battery, 2 12-inch guns. One over there, one where the museum sits here. This was put into service in 1899 and never fired an anchor. So this and about 6 others similar to it over on Sullivan's Island was our harbor defenses through World War I and World War II. Okay. All the coast artillery shut down after World War II, mainly due to 2 things: airplanes and submarines. Okay. And that, folks, I'm pretty much done. Hey, thanks for coming out.
Give us a thumbs up if you liked our video, and please subscribe by clicking the circle with our pictures on it. Thank you.